If you want to feel more connected to humanity and a little less alone, listen to Beautiful Anonymous. Each week, I take a phone call from one random anonymous human being. There's over 400 episodes in our back catalog. You get to feel connected to all these different people all over the world. Recent episodes include one where a lady survived a murder attempt by her own son. But then the week before that, we just talked about Star Trek. It can be anything. It's unpredictable. It's raw. It's real. Get Beautiful Anonymous wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Energy to Heal podcast. My name is Laura. I'm your host, and I have a guest here, a returning guest. She was on with us last week, and she's back. This is Heather Hughes. She is a co-founder of Splankna, has been a client and a practitioner for, I think, around 30 years, and has been working with people in this modality, working with the Lord to develop more parts of this modality. If you're kind of new here and you're wondering what in the world is Splankna, it is a faith-based inner healing modality that is used really often with people who are experiencing any kind of place in life where they're stuck. It could be emotionally stuck. You're stuck in sadness, anger, low motivation, low self-esteem, self-hatred, suicidal ideation. You are just not thriving in life in all the areas or in a very specific area. It could be you've been through some trauma and you know you haven't really addressed it. You haven't been able to fully heal through it. Splankna is a very gentle, partnering with God kind of way to untwist the things that get twisted in us when we walk through hard things or when we are showing up in life with these symptoms that we just don't want to have. We can't function with them or they're just not serving us well anymore. So that is the quick explanation of what we're talking about. But inside of Splankna, there's a very specific protocol that works with people who are suffering with addiction. Splankna is a wide area of healing, but there's a very specific protocol that you learn at master's training, at master's level, and it's giving you the ability to work with people who are addicted to anything. It could be a pornography addiction or alcohol, substances. It could even be something less obvious that you can't give up. Like the thing is, you're obsessively thinking about it. You can't operate without it. I want you to know that there is hope in that for you in the Splankna world. So, Heather, thank you for coming on and being willing to talk through addiction with us today.
Sure, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
So I remember getting trained in this. You have only been teaching this for, I think you said 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, oh, it's got to be the same as everything else. And it kind of is the same as what we learn in Splankna, but there is also its whole different twist. And as I remember you describing what we do with someone who's suffering with addiction, it's like my mind was just like so intrigued. So like, it just felt like, oh, this makes so much sense and gives you compassion for the person who's struggling with it, because it's not just that they're screwed up or they're weak or they don't have any self-discipline. Like it points you to this trauma or this moment in life where something got knocked off kilter. And I just feel like that's such a compassionate way to look at someone who's struggling with this. So can you give us a little introduction to what addiction work is in Splankna?
Sure, absolutely. I will say, too, for those people who are practitioners who might be listening, even if you don't have the addiction protocol in your tool belt, I did a lot of addiction work before God developed this, and I saw a lot of healing just in the regular protocol. So don't think that you won't be effective doing the regular protocol. Do you want me, should I tell a little bit about how this came into development?
Yeah. What made you realize there needed to be a protocol in the first place?
Yeah. So I had this client that I'd been working with pretty much off and on his whole life. And when he was 8 years old, he was exposed to pornography at school. And, there's a book called, and I'm sorry, I should have looked. It's either called good picture, bad picture, or bad picture, good picture. But I think it's good picture, bad picture.
Okay.
And it's a really good resource for families. It's written like you could read it to a child, like an 8-year-old, but it's about what happens in your brain when you see bad pictures, and especially pictures that your brain isn't ready to understand, or when it turns something on that's not supposed to be turned on yet. Mm-hmm. So it's just a little, like, it looks like a children's book, but it's a really good little resource. And it helped me understand what happened with this client of mine. So anyway, he was exposed around 8 years old when he and he found himself like wanting more and looking for more and all this kind of stuff. And when he was about 13, so 5 years later, his mother discovered that he was looking at stuff that was inappropriate, reached out, we did Splankna, and he like told me, like, he tried to break his iPad or his iPod that he had at the time. He tried really hard to not do it, and he just felt like he couldn't control it. And like, and when it was first discovered, he was just so full of shame and like, nothing's ever going to be the same. And I was able to talk him down and be like, hey, listen, let's see what we can do, And so we did some work, and then I didn't see him. He seemed to be doing better. His mother put in some protective things or whatever. And then when he was 18, he reached out and was like, hey, well, basically he asked me, what if sin doesn't have a consequence? And I said, well, what do you mean? Like, all sin has a consequence. And he said, well, like, when I used to look at pornography, what was the consequence? So I explained to him, well, there's isolation and shame, and the enemy has rights to you, and the consequences to the people involved in the industry, and like all this stuff. And I was like, so all of that is sort of a consequence. You don't see it necessarily, but it's something you feel it. You feel the shame and the separation, and like it pulls you away from like true relationships. I went into all the details, and I'm not going to go in here. And he started to cry and said, okay, well, I think I need help. And so I started working on him. And the first day I worked on him here at 18, which was, I feel like, beginning of 2020. And so I worked on him, and he had this really cool, like, I prayed that God, he was repeating after me, and I said, Lord God, would you enter every area of my mind? And when he went to pray it, he started laughing. And I was like, what the heck? Like, do you got some kind of mocking spirit, or like? And so we prayed. So I was like, okay, well, and then I prayed against demons or whatever. And then we tried praying again, and he started laughing. And finally I'm like, why are you laughing? He said, I don't know. And I said, well, what are you feeling? And he goes, I think I feel happy. Like, the idea of God being what's in my mind and entering. And I was like, oh, like, so this is just a little bonus thing here. And so that's the first time I experienced somebody experiencing holy laughter. And it was so cool, because it's like he couldn't not laugh. He was just overwhelmed with joy at the thought of God healing him and entering every corner of his mind. And so anyway, we finished that session. He was doing really well, but then he found himself still tempted again. And so we just like worked through all these things. And I thought, why the world is this taking so long? I had somebody come out for a 3-day intensive and be healed of his pornography, sex addiction, drug addiction, like all of his addictions were healed in that 3-day intensive. Like, he called me months later and said, it's so weird when I think of when I get stressed and I would normally do one of those substances, it's like, I don't even want to, I just pray. And like, so like I had somebody healed in 3 days intensive, and this kid who is desperate to be healed is not getting healed. Wow. And I think it's because I'd worked with him for so long, so I really cared about him, that God was like, okay, let's dig into this and like really heal him. And so
the Lord wanted to teach you something new. Right?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And for him and for other people. And also I can tell you why God took his time now. But we worked for 3 years? Maybe, yeah, because 2 or 3 years before God gave me the addiction protocol. And I would fast for him. I would, I'm like, what is happening? Why isn't he being healed? And he would like, and he's such a good kid. He'd be like, listen, God keeps showing me the scripture that says suffering leads I lost it. Suffering leads to perseverance, perseverance, character, character, hope. And he said, I have hope for the first time in my life. And so like he was okay with it taking its time and sometimes, other times he'd be discouraged. But he also told me that he is such an independent person that if he didn't have this issue, he would have never learned to depend on God. And here he is, this young man going to college who faith exploded through this process. And so even though I was upset with God with how long it was taking, I can't deny the fruit. Like this kid has the best relationship with God. He prays, he reads, he's dependent on God because now he knows how much he needs God, and God is his only freedom. Well, so I think it was right after an advanced training, I had a client who came out, an intensive who came out for the day to do a whole day of work. And I'd seen him over the years. And for some reason, this time, he tells me for the first time that he has a pornography addiction and would like to work on that. So we work on that. And as I'm working on him and have just done an advanced training, my brain starts going, wait, I think cell receptors have something to do with this. And I started thinking, anyway, I had another appointment scheduled with this kid like the next day. So I was telling him the things about cell receptors. He's very intelligent. And he's like, yeah, I feel like I have a forest of cell receptors that can only receive what I'm receiving through pornography and not through anything else. Wow. So we sat down and we prayed, and I said, okay, God, and I prayed like I often did with this, like, I need your help. I do not know how to do this. I do not know what needs to be done. What we've done hasn't been giving us like permanent fruit, like temporary fruit, but not permanent fruit. So what can we do? Yeah. And, like, it's hard when it's something like sex or food because you're made to have those things, And so that was the day I was sitting there working with him, and God, I swear, he like unzipped my brain, poured in this whole new idea. And I was like, wait, I think, what if we think about this from the perspective of, okay, because we're working at the time that he was first exposed to 8. Like, what was it like when you first saw it? Like, it felt like, oh my gosh, this fills something in me that nothing else has ever filled. And so that's when God showed me addiction emotions, where you got to clear it's almost like the benefit of that addiction. You got to clear each one of like whatever it did within you. And so I called Sarah and I was like, hey, listen, I'm working with this kid and this is what God's showing me. And she's like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Like, yes, do it, give it a try and let me know how it goes. And it was so powerful. And then we did the cell receptors where we like seared off all their cell receptors for receiving the inauthentic thing through pornography and built the new cell receptors to receive what like love and community and intimacy and confidence or whatever through the true godly sources where you would get that. Yeah. And it was like life-changing. And so that's kind of how the addiction protocol, then from there, I feel like I'm still learning. So we have learned like, okay, you have to go to the original setup trauma, like the trauma that happened when you were really young that made you vulnerable so that when you were exposed, you needed that. Like it was a hole that was left from a trauma. So we have to do the setup trauma. Then we have to like do the addiction set, not necessarily in this order. God sort of decides the order. There's also like a few other things that I have found through the process. So that's kind of how the addiction work was developed, because God knew I was not giving up on getting this kid healed. Mm-hmm. And so I just like kept pursuing him on that.
Okay, so just to clarify, you have if someone says, I want to work on an addiction, you're going to likely have a setup trauma. So that could be like they grew up with a dad who criticized them all the time, rejected them, didn't care about them, basically sent them the message, you're not important, you're not worth my time or energy. So they've got this low self-esteem, and then they get exposed to something inappropriate pictures, and it makes them feel alive and excited and just this aliveness that they haven't felt in such a long time because of this chronic low that they grew up in. So the setup trauma would be maybe a theme of all the rejection they faced from their dad. And then the addiction set would be the first time they were exposed to the thing that they are addicted to. Is that right?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, it could be a theme, but so far we've found it to be a set, an addiction set, like it's
Wow.
one moment in time. So, for instance, I had a client with food addiction, and even though she had a history of trauma with her mom, the setup was like a moment in time when she realized like she would never be good enough for her mom. And then the addiction set was like, it had to do with like the one way that she felt loved by her mom was her cooking. And so when her mom made something special for her, and like that day she was like, this is how I get the love from mom. And then that became a food addiction that she's now healed from.
Yeah.
And so it can be something like that. For instance, I honestly think this kid, his setup was his traumatic birth. So traumatic birth and not feeling like it was safe to connect to people, not because his mother almost died when he was born. And for a minute, you know, everyone thought she was. So he's like, oh, I this world isn't safe. I can't connect to people to get what I need. And then when pornography came along, it's like, oh, now I feel like something is being filled. Or like somebody I was working with drugs, I can't remember what his setup was, but his addiction when he tried the substance, it was like, it gave him confidence and it made him feel like anything was possible. And it felt like it took away like the dread that he always felt. And like, now I feel hope. And so clearly it's temporary and it's a substitute for what God really wants. What they really need is the healing so that they can receive that from God. But at this time, this is a good substitute for that. And so they latch onto it.
I was just hearing someone get interviewed about an alcohol addiction that they had gotten breakthrough and healed from. And it had been, maybe 10 years since they had been an alcoholic. And he said, what I realized about alcohol was never my problem. It was my solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what a great way to say that. It's like, alcohol works. Whatever we're addicted to, it is filling something. It's helping us run away from something. It's helping us overcome something, shove something down, cope with something. So it's a solution. The question is, what is it a solution to? And sometimes that can be figured out. But like, man, you hear about that client of yours whose original trauma was his birth. Like, I don't know how you would ever get to that in talk therapy. Like,
yeah, or that he would even be able to figure that out.
Yeah. I don't,
Yeah.
Some things are so like, oh, it was my traumatic birth. That's why I'm more prone to this addiction. I'm so
well,
grateful.
and the guy years ago who was healed of all of those addictions,
Yeah.
his root addiction set was vanished twin in the womb, which if you guys aren't familiar with vanished twin, you can look that up online. It happens, I think scientifically or medically, they have proven it happens about 40 to 45% of the time, where two babies are there in the very beginning and now there's only one. So now that we can do earlier ultrasounds, that's when they discovered how often this is happening. So this guy had lost a sister in the womb, and by healing that trauma, which was very emotional for him, even though he didn't know it, it's like it created this hole, and he was always looking for something to fill that hole, but he was never letting like his wife or the godly resources to fill that hole. And so once we broke this thing from the womb and like he was able to heal, what's interesting is him and his wife were like, we came here to try to save our marriage now that I know about all the women and all the things. And he was really broken and ready to like be healed and didn't want any part of that, which I think is a key to healing, is like being fully surrendered and repentant.
Yeah.
They came back the next day and she was like, oh my gosh, we talked all night. He finally let me in. She said, we came here with the hope of like saving our marriage. And I feel like we now have the potential and already feel that we have a better marriage than we ever have.
In one day.
And yeah, and it's like that makes so much sense because his addiction was blocking him from letting her be his person, you know? And the reason he wouldn't let her is because he felt like it was not honoring to hit the twin he had lost, and like she wasn't her. And so once he was able to mourn that loss and we were able to clear the addiction stuff, he was free to like let God fill that place, which I told you he called me later and said, and his wife.
Okay, this is like a little side note. We're getting off on a little bit of vanished twin, but is it correct? Am I remembering this correctly that you have said that vanished twin is often linked to addiction? Or am I remembering that incorrectly?
I don't think
You haven't
necessarily. I don't think that I have seen enough evidence of that.
Okay.
But I could see that it could be, you know, but I don't think I've ever said that.
The people that I've worked with vanished twins, I was like, in the beginning, I was like, oh, great. How am I going to explain to this client that the reason they're struggling is because 40 years ago in the womb, there was a twin in there with them and something happened. That twin didn't develop all the way and they're carrying around survivor's guilt or shame or whatever it is. And I kind of remember just feeling like whenever vanished twin would come up, I'd be like, oh no. But I have seen it. It is so powerful. Like there is like some of the biggest breakthrough stories that I've seen in my own experience of being a practitioner is with these vanishing twin stories.
Yeah. Well, and you know, if you think about it, there is on the internet, there's a place where it says vanished twin syndrome, and it'll tell you all the symptoms of someone who has a vanished twin, like what's typical for that, like survivor guilt and different things. And I do think it's powerful. And one of the reasons is the earlier the trauma, the more significant it impacted your life and how you saw yourself. So when you go back and you change something from the very beginning, you're changing some part of like how they've always seen things, and now they can see things completely. It's like a paradigm shift the younger the trauma is. Does that make sense? Like if when you were one or in the womb, you didn't feel wanted and your whole life you have believed that nobody really wants you, and we heal that, then you're able to be like, oh, I'm actually wanted. Like people actually want me, you know?
Yep.
Interestingly, for those of you that listened to last week with Maya and the generational stuff, she had a vanished twin. I actually saw this in the ultrasound and everything.
Oh, you did.
And so she had a vanished twin. So like that story of the labyrinth, when she like had that epiphany of like, oh my gosh, there's nothing wrong with me, you know? And like her desire for relationships has always been so strong. It's just really kind of cool to see how the healing of that has impacted her life.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay. So going back to, I've got my addiction protocol paperwork in front of me, like just like reminding myself of everything that I learned when I heard you teach this. I just want to give an example. So like when you were teaching us about a trauma emotion, how to think about it differently. If you're a client who comes in and you're doing a protocol for addiction, and let's say that you're in the middle of a set and you're doing these addiction emotions and anguish comes up. Well, in that session, you're going to think about it with your practitioner. You're going to hold that emotion as the first time you were ever exposed to the thing that you are experiencing addiction with. Let's say it's alcohol. Okay, so if anguish comes up in your session as one of the hooks, one of the reasons that thing is so powerful is because it solves your anguish. So you would then hold it, not a feeling of anguish, you would hold the opposite, almost like it's describing a feeling of pleasure in a new way that you've never experienced before. You're drinking and the anguish disappears. You're accessing this new level of light and easy and joy. And that's why the alcohol felt so full for you, so powerful for you, because it gave you access to something that you were desperate for at that moment. And I want you to hear that, because people who are in addiction, like we said in the beginning, it's so easy to just blame yourself and tell yourself that you're just not strong enough. Something's wrong with you. You don't have enough discipline. You don't have enough faith. And I want you to hear there is so much more going on spiritually, subconsciously in you than you are even aware of consciously. And if you are in this place and you just think it's your fault, you're not good enough, you don't have enough faith, all that is the enemy heaping more and more shame on top of what you're already stuck in, which is exactly his plan for you. He wants you to heap shame on yourself and to beat yourself up so that you never go seek the Lord for healing, or you never go get a session done and get freedom in this. I want you to hear that this kind of addiction stuff has generational components to it. It has trauma components to it. There are neural pathways and cell receptors in your body that have responded to this particular addiction that you're struggling with, and there is hope to break out of that. This is exactly what the Lord has shown Heather over the years.
Yeah. And, to tag on to that, I have two things I want to say. With my client, the one who I've been working with, who kind of was the key to developing this, I remember at one point we were breaking, like, I don't know, something. And he was like, I need a minute. Like, he's like, I still feel like I need to forgive myself, or like I need I need to like really understand that God forgives me for this. And because like, he feels guilty for giving into the temptation. And I said to him, he has a sister. So I said, listen, if your sister was kidnapped and somebody shot her up with some drugs and like got her addicted to those drugs so that now she would do anything, even sell her body to get that drug, would you call her a sinner or a victim? And I said, you were 8 years old. You did not choose this. This is something that you were exposed to. Now, sure, he did choose it over time, and he does, but it's not something that he needs to see himself as like, he's trying so hard to fight this.
Yeah.
And I think we tend to think of people with addiction as like, well, they just need to stop. Like, people do not have the pornography pull, because there are actually people out there that don't. Like, not all men have that. Like, his own father and brother don't have that kind of pull. Sure, they were curious at a time, or they maybe did that, but they don't have the pull that makes them feel like they can't control it like he does. Mm-hmm. And then, but the advice would be, well, just don't do it. Like, when you want to do it, just don't do it. But it doesn't feel like he can control it. And that's why I gave him that scenario. And then the other thing I wanted to say is I was working with a guy who got introduced to substances when he was a teenager, like 15. And it really did feel like, oh my gosh, this makes me feel normal. This makes me feel okay. Like, he never quite felt right until he started having these substances. And then they made him feel all these things like valuable and worthy and important and okay. So like, now you have this magical thing that makes you feel these things, because he, again, was set up for that by his traumatic childhood to need that. And so when that happened, so I'm working with him and I'm talking to him about like healing all of this. And I asked him, like, why do you want to be healed? Because he's like in his 30s now. And he said, well, I would like to have a wife and children, like be a normal person, like have a real life. But what I realized by talking to him is what he thinks is going to happen is that he is going to give up the thing in his life that gives him life, that fulfills him, that helps him feel okay. And so once he's no longer addicted, he believes, I'll be miserable, but at least I can have a normal life. And when you realize that's sometimes what they think, like, once I give this up, I'm signing up for a miserable life, but I won't be addicted and my family will love me and people will respect me. So they don't really have hope that, not everyone, but some people don't have hope that life could actually be good, that you could be filled with something else. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I didn't realize that until I was working with this guy, and I realized, oh my gosh.
Which would make sense why they aren't jumping to get the chance to get healed, because it's like, I don't know if I'm ready to live a miserable, sad, lonely life.
Yeah, because that's what they think they're signing up for. And like he's doing this because his parents want him to, because he wants this life. But he really does think if this works and I'm no longer addicted, I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to be unhappy. I'm going to go back to life the way it was. And so like trying to encourage him, like, no, we're going to walk through this in the process of like getting it so that your system will allow other people and allow God and allow other things to fill that place. That's the whole cell receptor, building the cell receptors to receive it the right way. And you know, that makes me think too, that kid that I was working with the pornography, when he was in college, like when we started working through this in the beginning, like he doesn't put himself out there. He doesn't let himself be filled by people. And by his third year of college, he like had this whole community, and he was like sharing things with them and they were sharing with him, and he was starting to get filled with like the real people and not the imaginary world.
Yes.
You know, and he started, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, and I don't even know if he realized the difference. And what was interesting is when he went back to visit the year after that, because he graduated in 3 years, he went back to visit the year after. He told me he was blown away how every single person that he connected with that third year went out of their way to see him while he was there. And they were like, and he was like they like me. They want to be around me. They value me. And like, he almost like he couldn't even imagine that. And which is crazy because he has siblings in his family, and he's actually kind of a favored one, but he can't see it.
Wow.
And like that, going back to visit the friends at college, and one of them had to drive 2 hours to have dinner with him. He was blown away.
Yeah.
So like the pornography was filling some kind of like emotional, intimate need that he wasn't allowing, even though it was available. And so now he's
need that is put inside of us by God, like the need for community, the need for people to be around us, the need to not be lonely is a God-given thing. But then when you feel that loneliness creep up, it's easy to go to something like pornography, and it makes the loneliness settle back down. It makes you have this pseudo experience with humans. And it's so obviously the enemy when it's like like you said, he would have never reached out to other real humans who can know him and affirm him and be honest with him and build friendships with him if he's always getting this pseudo version of human connection. And doesn't that just seem like the plan of the enemy? Keep people stuck, keep people isolated, and keep them wrapped up in shame.
Yep. And what's interesting is before this kid was even healed of addiction, he was already able to let go of the shame, which I thought was an amazing feat of the Lord.
Yeah.
You know? And like, it's just insane. And if you don't mind, can I shift gears a little bit about temptation?
Yeah, please.
So, you know, over the years, I've been trying to figure out like, okay, so like with this kid, I would say to him, like, I don't even know what our goal is. Like, we don't want to shut down your sexuality because that's part of who God made you to be. And I've known men who had pornography addiction get married and be shut down sexually because they were trying to resolve their addiction by trying to shut it down. Now they're married and they don't sleep with their wives. And you know what I mean? So like, we know our goal is not to shut down sexuality. That's a part of you that God made. And so like trying to figure out like, what is our goal here? Because you're still going to find women attractive. You're still going to, you know. And so as we're struggling through that process, and I was trying to figure out, what does healing mean for something like this? Does it mean like, because I had a client, my very first client ever as Splankna was suicidal. And my goal for her was that, and she always said she had a plan. Like, I always know what I'll do next. And like, my goal for her was that suicide would become repulsive to her, that she wouldn't even, like, it wouldn't even be a consideration. And that is where we ended after it took about a year. But that's where we ended. And that's been, I don't know, 20 years, more than 20 years. And she has never attempted again. And it's not an option for her. Well, that's kind of what I was thinking. Maybe that's what we need. Our goal should be that pornography feels repulsive to you. And so that was sort of where I was going with this. And then that wasn't happening. And he was still tempted and sometimes able to not give into it and sometimes not. No, and we were noticing patterns and we were trying to figure out like, oh, like when you go back to college and when you come home, you're more tempted. And maybe that has to do with like when you leave, you feel lonely again and like whatever. So we're trying to figure out all these patterns. Well, recently I read a book called Gay Girl, Good God, and her name is Jacqueline something. And that book, I mean, I highly recommend this book for just the world we're living in today, to understand what's happening, to have compassion on people who are tempted in same-sex attraction and different things too, because like this woman, and she had abuse as a child that she remembered, but she had same-sex attraction, only same-sex attraction, never any guys. She gave into it finally at some point, and she had girlfriends and she was in that lifestyle, and then she found the Lord and she became a Christian, and she was convicted of her own that she did not want to pursue a gay relationship anymore. And so she broke up with her girlfriend and she started pursuing the Lord. And one of the things I love about the book is really the focus on God is enough and like pursue God. But what I feel like how this changed my thinking around addiction is there's a difference between temptation and action, and being able to realize that temptation is not a sin. Temptation is a part of life. In fact, scripture says that God will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. And I think when it's addiction, you are tempted beyond what you can bear. And so our goal should be to get them to a place that they can be tempted, but they can bear it, if that makes sense. And I didn't know that that should be the goal until I read her book. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And like being able to say to my clients who are tempted by things that they don't want to they don't want to pursue, and to be able to say, you know, the temptation in itself is not a sin. You're not a bad person because you're tempted by this. This has to do with a lot of different things. And it's just like emotions aren't a sin. Like you can be angry. That's not a sin. What's a sin is what you do with it. You know, so if you act in anger, if you give in to temptation, that's when you step into sin. And so just having that new understanding, I think, is helpful for clients who are struggling with addiction. Like you may still be tempted, but that doesn't mean you have to be defined by that anymore, because you're not. If anything, you should be proud of yourself that you didn't give in to that. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah. And I feel like if people believe that the temptation is sinful, then the shame spiral starts even earlier. And now they're even accepting that shame and beating themselves up when they haven't even sinned yet, which again is just like, you can almost just imagine the enemy whispering in their ear, like, look at you. I can't believe you're even tempted to do that. How pathetic. And
Exactly.
then it seems like they're way more likely to give in to the sin because they feel like they already crossed the line. So that's such a good thing to distinguish the difference in.
Yes. Yeah. That
So
I feel like is key, and maybe added into, I mean, I'm still pursuing God. I feel like I have it swirling in my mind and that it's significant, but I don't have exactly what that looks like and how that fits the protocol. But I think it's an important piece of it. So in some ways, the addiction protocol is still in process of being developed, and which is why we haven't put out the specialty training for it yet. But I really feel like God was showing me early on, like sex and pornography, like is such a temptation for men that God, not that women can't be, but especially for men, that's the way that the enemy is trying to pull the men away from God. And it's food and image for women, that the enemy is trying to pull people away from God by having them addicted to those things. Does that make sense?
yeah, it's so interesting. The longer I am a practitioner and you sit, and I can't even imagine, you know, doing it as long as you've been doing it. I've only been doing it for 3 years, but it's almost like you just see these patterns of like, no matter what you're working on, whether it's anger or these emotional entanglements or relationship entanglements or whatever people are stuck in, it all boils down to this place and this strategy of the enemy to just keep people stuck and small and tortured and covered in these blankets of shame. And it all, like you guys teach, it all boils down to there's just lies underneath all of these events that people experience. And when you hear the enemy whisper these lies to you over and over and over again, it makes so much sense to me why you can't hear the truth of like a Bible verse that says, God loves you, God loves you. Because your whole life you heard the lie whispered to you, nobody cares about you.
Mm-hmm.
Your life was an accident. Even your own parents didn't even like you. It's like, man, the enemy has a very short playbook, a very thin playbook. And it's just to whisper lies to us as often as possible until we start to believe them. And then if we agree with the lie that he feeds us, like humans are not worth connecting with or not safe to connect with or nobody loves me anyway, it can derail how we view ourselves, how we view God, the way we show up in the world. So yeah, it's like no matter what part of Splankna you're talking about, addiction or generational or a trauma you've walked through, you can really just boil it down to, where is the enemy lying to me? What am I believing that doesn't line up with scripture? And then if you can get to that place, it's like, okay, Lord, I gave my life to you. I decided to follow you. So even if my emotions don't match up, I am going to choose with my will to believe what you say about me instead of what I feel about me. I'm going to choose to believe what you say about community instead of what I feel about community. Teach me how to do that. Grow something new in me. It just feels like everything in Splankna can be boiled down to those lies.
It's funny listening to you. I'm like going, I wonder if part of I'm still developing as you're talking. Create a creative new set where you could imagine yourself being able to resist that temptation could be a really big piece in this protocol. And I'm going to try it with some of my clients. So, because what you're saying is like a creative new set.
Yeah.
So
yeah, true.
Now you can take credit for helping develop.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I don't even know how to put it into words, but it is like I've heard you guys talk about the patterns that start arising when you do this work over and over and over again with people. And I'm guessing that's how you develop protocols like this, is the Lord starts showing you patterns. But it just makes me so, and that's part of the reason I love doing this podcast, is I feel so passionate about teaching Christians how to know who they are in Christ, know their worth and their authority, because how many lies of the enemy will have no landing place in us if we know who we are.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's passion that you're talking about comes from the Lord, because I believe that the pattern that I have seen over the years is that God prioritizes your relationship with him in the healing and your identity and calling, like why he created you. And the more you can believe the truth about yourself, the more you can realize and receive the love of God and act in your calling and what you were designed for. And the more you can really pursue the mantle that God has put on you. And so I totally agree with you. Totally. One thing I would say too, just for your listeners, is I want everyone to know that I am not an addiction expert, that there could have been things that I said that doesn't jive with some people and the way they think. I am just a tool in the hands of God trying to figure out how to help people. And I've got to see people healed of addiction, but I'm in no way saying that I'm some kind of expert in this. So I just want that to be known. God is the expert. I am just a disciple who learns from the Lord, and am trying to help people the best I can.
Yeah, and I love that even in your story, you're like, I've seen people healed of multiple addictions in 3 days, or I've seen people that have gone 5 years still working through one addiction. And it's like, I feel like all of that just helps us let go and be like, listen, we're not the healers. We have no idea. We're just listening to Jesus, just like you guys are.
Yep. And God is going to do it in his own time. And like I said, and even like this kid said, if I hadn't dealt with this, if this hadn't been such a process for me, I never would have learned to depend on God or you, like another person. And so he can be thankful in the process. And I am just in awe. Like, I don't know if many people could fight this hard for freedom and it actually builds their faith instead of discourages them. But that's what's happening in this person. And God knew that would happen. And God is doing something greater in him. So this story is to be continued in what God is doing for this person.
Yeah, and Lord knows we need more men who know how to come alongside more men and help them get their own breakthrough for porn and it's everywhere. It's all over the internet. The access to it is so pervasive, and to have an army of men rise up and be like, hey, we've conquered this. We've come out on the other side. We're coming alongside you to help you do the same thing. Like, I just imagine the authority that the Lord has handed this man because of his long journey and fight through this is kind of inspiring too.
Yeah, definitely. It's not, and I would say it was not my plan for it to take so long. My plan was, let's get it done that first day. And that's where we have to and that's one of the things I love about Splankna and hate, that we get to I do love though, that we get to just be like, I have no idea. God is with us. He's going to help us. And we just going to come from a surrendered posture and just get to partner with him. And it's so beautiful. The part that's frustrating is that it's not done in my timing, but that's my issue that I need to work through.
So true. Yeah. So true. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up with saying every once in a while I kind of touch on just some reminders that out there on the internet. You can look up splankna.com, Splankna. There are testimonies on the website. There is so many cool videos and just pieces of information that you can look up on the website, as well as finding a practitioner in your area. If you are ready to work through some stuff or experience what Splankna is all about, you can look up by zip code anyone in your area. And if no one is in your area, you can look for somebody who says they are listening prayer certified. And all that means is they can do Zoom sessions. And so you could be on the other side of the world and it wouldn't matter. You can do sessions with them. And then I also wanted to give you a reminder. Core training, which is training for people who are experiencing Splankna for the first time, they want to become a practitioner. It only happens a few times a year. And the next one, the last one of the year, is in October, I believe. Do you know, is that true? Can you verify that?
Yes, okay. October.
If you are interested in becoming a practitioner, I want you to know you don't have to be a licensed marriage and family therapist in order to attend this training. I attended it as a registered nurse. It's a weekend-long training followed by some supervision hours and notes that you hand in, a few more things, but so worth the training. It is the most fascinating training I've ever attended in my life. I highly recommend it to someone, even if you're wanting to just know how to use this protocol just for family and friends, or if you're wanting to make a career out of it. I will tell you, there are many, many people out there who desperately need these kind of tools and are looking for practitioners. And one of my hopes with this podcast is just getting the word out about Splankna so we can get more practitioners out in the world. So go ahead and check those things out. Thank you for being here as we talked through all things addiction. If you know somebody who's struggling with addiction, they've tried all the things, they've been to talk therapy, they haven't made significant or lasting progress, send them this episode. I want them to hear hope, that they don't have to just accept this place that they're in, that the Lord cares about where they're at, and He wants to meet them there. We'll see you next week.